Florida beekeepers. We have some of the best minds in bees in the state. University of Florida is leading the way in research with bees, and we have our university office, campus here in town of Davie, in the poncho that is at that location is Dr. William Kern. He's associate professor. He has some really interesting stuff. If you ever want to know about native honeybees, native bees, or local fauna, this is the guy that will keep you. And you can actually call him. I don't know if he wants me to say that, but you can call him up, and he answers the phone, and he says it's Bill, and you can ask him anything you want about bees, and he will help you out. Today we're fortunate enough to have Dr. Kern here, and today he is talking about something that someone brought up, is why do bees swarm, and how and why honeybees swarm. So, without any further ado, Dr. Kern, thank you very much.
Welcome. Good morning. All right, well, this is a topic that a lot of people are interested in, and it's also a topic that a lot of beekeepers don't have a real good understanding of. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why honeybees swarm and how they do it. So this is the public perception of what a bee swarm is, where you have this cloud of bees that's coming after people. All right, that is not what we perceive as a bee swarm. For us, a bee swarm is how a hive reproduces. All right, so this is why honeybees make a hive and comb. All right, and you can't see it unfortunately, but all of these cells contain a little curled larvae down in the bottom. They do this to reproduce, to multiply. All right, but this is not how a colony reproduces. All right, this is how a colony builds up and multiplies its numbers. Why do bees make honey? And unfortunately you can't see it. This is a bee gum covered in snow. European honeybees usually have to store almost 100 pounds of honey to make it through a winter. So that's why they're making honey. They're not making it for us. They're making it for themselves to use. When we think about honeybees as eusocial organisms, we should actually consider the colony as the superorganism. So the colony is going through all of the functions that we normally think of as a living organism. All right? It maintains itself. That's the queen laying eggs and producing babies. It feeds itself, sending out workers to collect food and bring it back. And then when it gets big enough and has filled up its space, it will divide into two, and now you'll have two colonies. So we have to think about a honeybee colony as a superorganism when we're dealing with honeybees and their behavior and biology. All right, so why do honeybees swarm? And like I said, this is how they reproduce. They have to, in order to have two colonies, they literally have to split apart. The work of the colony, the queen laying eggs, the workers going out getting food, taking care of the young, this is all to maintain the colony. So it's maintaining the organism, the superorganism. So swarming is how we get from one colony to two colonies. You probably know this, but just to make sure. All right, how is a new queen made? When the colony gets too full, there's too many bees, they've run out of space. That's one of the things that can stimulate a colony to swarm. All right? We can stop that as beekeepers by doing what's called a split, where you literally split the colony in half. And they will make a new queen for the other half, or you can supply them with a mated queen if you're trying to maintain European colonies. So the queen either lays an egg in the swarm cell. So if they get really crowded, the queen will actually lay an egg in the queen cups that the workers have made down at the bottom of the hive. If something happens to the queen, what the workers can do is they will actually start building a queen cell by extending out a worker cell. All right, so something has happened to the queen. She's stopped laying fertile eggs or diploid eggs. So all she's producing now is drones. So they'll take one of the workers, a young worker, and they will actually make a queen cell. So when we have queen cells up on the frame, especially in the center of the frame or up near the top of the frame, those are called replacement cells. So this is the hive trying to replace a failing queen. If the cells are on the bottom of the frame, those are swarm cells. So swarm cells, the queen has actually laid an egg in those cups. And then the old queen, the workers start starving her a little bit. They reduce how much they feed her. She'll lose weight. She'll get more slender. Now she'll be able to fly again. So she will fly, and then about half of the colony will leave with her. All right, once she is gone, those daughters that are down on the bottom of that frame, the first one to emerge will come out, pop out through the bottom of the cell, and then will go and kill all of her royal sisters.
Wow.
She'll chew through the side of the cell to kill the larvae or the pupa. All right. Now she is going to become the new queen for the colony. So there are some other things that can happen. So if the queen is getting old and has stopped producing, or the amount of queen pheromone she's producing has decreased, the workers will actually work to replace her. That's where you have a supersedure cell. Those cells up high on the frame. So she is going to be replaced by the workers. Usually in the springtime, the spring population is built up. They're completely filled the box that they're in. All right, so we've got crowded conditions. There's not a frame that doesn't have bees covering it. You also will sometimes get what's called brood nest congestion. For those of you who remember Bud Grant, he used to call it, it was honeybound. If a colony is so full of honey, they have to start putting it into brood cells. Now there's not any place for the queen to lay her eggs. So the colony is said to become honeybound. And they tend to get defensive and get ready to swarm. So the queen initiates swarming by depositing eggs in the queen cell, or if something's happened to her, the workers will actually start building a queen cell over a one-day-old larvae. That's usually if something has happened to the queen. All right? And usually we start seeing a lot more drone cells about a week to 2 weeks before the queens are produced. So these are swarm
peanut shell kind of.
Yeah. So these are, and then these are supersedure cells. These are ones, they're about halfway up on the frame. Right? So we also have drone cells here and worker cells. So that's the difference between supersedure queen cells and swarm queen cells. So once that first queen emerges, and she came out of this one, so she emerged out of the bottom of the cell, you can see that she went on all these 6 other cells and she chewed into the side of the cells. So they are now considered aborted cells. She either killed the larvae or the pupa inside, or she just chewed into it and the workers pulled those larvae and pupae out and got rid of them. All right, now we've got 2 things that are happening. The old queen has left with half of the workers. The new young queen, who will become the queen of the colony, has eliminated the competition. I guess that is the gentle way of saying, you should call it sororicide. Yeah, it's killing your sisters, sororicide. And then she will go on, after about 3 days, she'll move around the colony. She's releasing some pheromone. So she's sort of establishing herself. Then she will fly out on her mating flight. She'll fly out to a drone aggregation area, and she will normally mate 5 to 8 times a day, and she'll do this for up to 3 days. And she will store all the sperm that she gets in her spermatheca, which is a little holding container in her abdomen. And that's all the sperm she will have for all of the fertilized eggs she will produce the rest of her life. It's a lot of sperm, and it's also a lot of eggs. I mean, she's producing between 2,000 and 3,000 eggs a day for up to 18 months. But that's not really fair, because up north where they live for 18 months, 6 months they're not laying eggs because it's winter time. All right, so she will then come back, she starts laying eggs. She will never leave that colony again until the situation is such that that colony will swarm again, and then she will leave to start a new daughter colony. So the old queen starts the daughter colony. The new queen starts the mother, or takes over the mother's colony. And if you, let's see, how many people have been around a swarm? Okay, so you just walk out. I don't even usually worry about wearing a bee suit if I'm going into a swarm, even if it's an Africanized swarm. We have had some problems, though, in a situation called a hot swarm. Has anybody encountered a hot swarm? That's where they act like a ticked off colony. Usually that is because it is a colony that has been excluded from someplace. So somebody's done a bee exclusion, the bees have been kicked out of their home, they're not happy. And as soon as you get close to them, they will start stinging you. All right, that is not a normal swarm. That's an unusual situation. When the old queen leaves, she's going to go just a short distance. In my bee yard, I know exactly where they're going to go. Almost always. There's a big ficus tree right next to my bee yard, and they almost always go to the same branch. And then I have had a swarm that would go to the palm tree behind my bee yard. And that's it. Those are the 2 places I always go to look for them. While they've gathered there, outside of the old hive, usually about 20, 30 yards away, they will start sending out scouts. The scouts will go out, look for another hive site.
Real estate.
Yeah, they're going out, checking out all of the cavities, potential colony sites. When they come back, the scouts will do the dance. All right. Does everybody know the circle dance and the waggle dance? No? Okay. The circle dance is what bees do in the colony to tell other bees where there's good food supply within 50 yards of the colony. If it's farther away than that, they do what's called the waggle dance. And so it's sort of like a figure-8 dance. All right, so they go around, wiggle, go around, wiggle. All right, so the vertical line is the direction to the sun. All right, so the angle off of that vertical line, they do the waggle, that tells the deflection of the flight from the direction to the sun. That's how they tell other bees where to go. And so this is the waggle dance. And the fewer times they waggle their bottom, all right, the shorter the distance is. The more times they waggle, the farther it is. All right? So the angle that they do that waggle part gives them direction. The number of times they do the waggle says how far it is. So basically it's, vector and distance. That's how they tell each other. So in the swarm, the scouts will go out, they'll find a good place, they'll come back, and they'll start dancing. And the better the site is, the more energetically they dance. So more scouts go out and check out the space. They come back, they start doing the same waggle dance. All right, more and more scouts go out. Pretty soon, you've got virtually all of the scouts doing the same dance. That's how the swarm decides where they're going to fly. When they reach that consensus, that's when they fly to that new swarm site or new nest site. And this is just a little bit about how the angle is the deflection off of vertical. So vertical is essentially supposed to be the direction to the sun. So if they're flying towards the sun, their waggle dance will be going straight up and down. It'll be going straight up. All right, if it's directly opposite the direction of the sun, it'll be going the other way. But that's how they communicate. And this, I know it's hard to see, this is actually a scout bee who's come back and is on the outside of the swarm doing the waggle dance. And you can see that there's a whole bunch of bees sort of right around her that are watching her or sensing the waggle dance. And they can actually do this in the dark, but on a swarm, they're doing it out in the open. They don't actually have to even see it. They can feel her doing the dance. They're touching her with their antenna, and they can count the number of times she wiggles her abdomen, and they know which direction off of vertical she is indicating. And this is how they figure out where they're going to fly. And it's just showing the right again. Oh, yeah, you can sort of see it. And sometimes, Janie Ellis was real fond of saying that honeybees know what they're doing. They know where they want to go. Sometimes they don't. All right, this is one of my swarm traps up in Palm Beach County. This swarm decided they were going to build their colony underneath it. Well, I mean, we did get them collected, but that was not the way they were supposed to do it.
Why don't you just turn it upside down?
All right, why can't you do that? just turn it upside down. The cells will all be pointing in the wrong direction. Remember, the cells all point slightly upward, so that the food stays in with the larvae. You flip that cone over, now all the food is going to run out. And probably the larvae will start falling out too. All right? That's why when you're moving comb, and you cut the comb to transfer it into a box, you always have to make sure that the orientation stays the same. So the top always is the top. There's a really good book. If you're interested in this, there's a really good book about it called Honeybee Democracy. Has everybody read it? Has anybody read it? Huh? Okay. It's called Honeybee Democracy, and it basically tells how bees make decisions. And it's a really good book. Matter of fact, I think this is probably one of the books required for the Master Beekeeper program. It's on the list of recommended reading. All right, so that's the end. Now I'll be glad to answer any questions. Yeah.
Someone told me one time that it was good to face the entrance of the bee either east or west instead of north and south.
Usually we usually face it either east or south so that they get early morning sun, so they can warm up quicker when it's cool. In Florida, it's not much of a problem. So the question was, should you orient your hives east or west or north or south? It's usually we say orient it south or east so they get early sun, because you want them to warm up early so they can get out and start flying. Late afternoon sun, they're already plenty warm by the afternoon. So I would say either east or south. Yes?
You had said they made honey, like it sounded to me like to protect them from the cold. Is that, or why do they make honey?
Okay, the question is, why do they make honey? Because that is their energy source for the winter.
So they eat it.
They eat it, right? That's their food. Just like we can food for the winter, they're doing sort of the same thing, because they have to generate an awful lot of heat. If you go into a beehive in the wintertime, and I'm not talking about wintertime in Florida, I'm talking about wintertime in Minnesota, you can go into that hive and the bees will be clustered. The center of that cluster, where the queen is going to be about 90 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
All right? They need to stay warm, all right? And the bees on the outside, it's a little bit cooler out there, so they'll migrate in, they'll move back and forth. But generally, they're keeping warm, and they're doing that by burning sugar. And then the sugar gives them energy. They vibrate their wing muscles. The vibrating wing muscles generates heat. That's what keeps them warm in the wintertime.
And they can withstand our summers here where it's so hot?
Yeah, they don't have a problem. And, we think about Florida being hot in the summertime. It really isn't.
Well, 3 or 4 in the afternoon.
3 or 4 in the afternoon, still, what? It's 97 degrees? That's nothing. You're out in the summertime in Utah or Nevada, it's 110. And their big problem is, they're trying to cool off, but they need water to do that. They use evaporative cooling to keep the colony at about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So they have to have access to water. Here, they have to cool off a little bit. If it gets too hot, they beard out front. But they can handle it pretty easily. Yeah.
I've heard multiple theories on why beekeepers use smoke while they're working in the hive. One was that it calms them. The other one was it retards their ability to release pheromones to
Yeah.
tell the others to go attack whatever's coming in their house.
All right, the question was, why do beekeepers use smoke? Well, the smoke particles blocks the receptors on their antennae. All right, so they can't detect the alarm pheromone.
Okay, so there's
Right.
a pheromone.
Yeah, so the alarm pheromone is that thing that, if you've ever gotten bees really upset at you, and you smell that sort of banana smell, all right, that's their alarm pheromone. So when you use smoke, it blocks the receptor sites on their antenna. So it's like a key in a lock, all right? If you put a blank key into the lock, you can't put another key in it, the right key in it, to open the lock. It's the same way it is with the pheromones. The smoke is basically that uncut key, that key blank. You put it into the lock, that receptor is locked out. The alarm pheromone can't activate that receptor site. That can't send the signal to the brain to tell them, all right, now it's time to get upset. That's why they tend to stay calm. But it's basically to block their receptor sites.
Got it.
About how long would that last for the bee?
Well, if you're working with European honeybees, that might work for 10 or 15 minutes. When I'm working my Africanized bees, I'm smoking them almost continuously. And I actually had a bunch of people telling me, oh, you're smoking your bees too much. And I said, hell no.
Why would you not get the smoke?
No. I am not smoking my bees too much. There are some things you have to be careful of with Africanized bees. You don't want to go into the brood box very, very often, if at all. Because that's one of the things that will cause them to abscond. They're real prone to absconding. So if you have a really bad small hive beetle problem, they'll abscond. You start developing disease problems, especially brood disease problems, they'll abscond. And as beekeepers, we don't want our bees to abscond. But from the bees' perspective, it is a good management tool for diseases that affect the brood. Because the adults leave, the brood is left behind, it dies, it leaves the diseases with them. Right? So it is a mechanism for escaping brood diseases like American foul brood, European foul brood, most of the viruses. You're going to leave behind a large proportion of the varroa mites. It's not going to help with something like tracheal mites, because the tracheal mites are in the adult bees. Okay. I think that answered the question. Yeah.
On the swarming, when you talked about that, you talked about the supersedure cells being created, and the original queen may not have left during that case, because swarm fish can leave,
Right.
sure. But if she's being superseded, what happens when they're both there and that goes on? The bees work it out that she's the one that dies, or
No, the workers will kill
the
her.
workers kill?
Yeah, the workers kill her.
They'll kill the old one.
They'll kill
Yeah,
the
right.
old one because she has stopped producing queen pheromone.
Okay.
So her queen pheromone production has reduced to the point where they don't recognize her as the queen anymore, and so they will kill her. Usually not until they have that new queen ready to come out. Yeah.
Is there a best practices for the flooring of a hive, a cement versus out in the grass or in a wooded area? Is there one preferred over the other? The reason I ask is because I set up one in a wooded area, and I used to get these little black beetle things. I put one on a cement block, and I don't have that.
A concrete block in full sun, or concrete
Like this area.
floor in full sun is perfectly fine. Or you can use weed cloth,
Okay.
and then in full sun, We do see that if you have a problem with small hive beetle, you're going to have much fewer problems in a full sun location. It seems that the beetles can't tolerate the heat as much as the bees can.
Maybe that's
And so we tend to see less of a beetle problem in sunny apiary locations versus forested locations.
Two
Yes.
questions. You recommend shade, number one, and the other question was, what are those toxic chemicals, those neonics that kill bees, so we can avoid using those products in our gardens and stuff like that? People that use like pesticides and stuff, which ones are worse?
Well, okay, give me the first question first.
Shade.
All right, the question is, do I recommend shade? Generally not. As long as the bees have access to water, they will maintain their temperature. We seem to have more problems when bees are kept in shade than if they're kept in full sun. So I don't recommend shade. If you want, I mean, you can have telescoping cover and then an inner cover. Lately, though, I've switched almost entirely over to migratory covers just for ease of use.
What's a migratory?
Migratory, you don't have a migratory cover. Migratory cover is a board that covers the top and it has two little cleats on the outside, but nothing on the side. It's called a migratory cover because you can take them and take hives and put them on a pallet and put them right against each other with no space in between. So you can fit more hives on a pallet. And then it's easy to strap down. That's why they're called migratory covers. So I've just switched over to those because they're easier to deal with.
And when hurricanes come, what do you do?
Usually I'll just strap the hives down. So I'll have stakes into the ground, or I have 5-gallon buckets full of concrete with a metal loop in it, and I'll run a strap over the top literally to hold them down. And usually that's all you have to do. If you haven't gotten into your hive in a while, they're going to be pretty well glued together anyway. So if you can prevent them from being blown over or blown off the stand, that's all you really have to do. I'm trying to think if I've had any. I don't think I've had any of my hives damaged in either Wilma or the last one, Burma. So some people I know have. They had their hives blown over, but if they had strapped them down, usually that's what people do. They just strap them down. They can tolerate the wind.
How often do you supposed to go in and check the hive?
Once a month.
Huh?
Once a month.
BMR says once a month.
Yeah, once a month.
Unless
A lot of hobbyists like working their bees. I have some beehives that if I could get away with checking them once a year, I would. They're just. These were some African colonies that somebody gave me. They're not pleasant. So that's why I have to really smoke them heavy. Yep.
I'm having a hard time understanding if we're not supposed to have Africanized bees, why do you have it?
Why do I have it? The legal reason is that I have a permit from the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Service. And it's because I'm doing research on it. That is the legal reason. The other reason is that, I deal quite a bit with bees that have gone into structures and how to deal with those. And so sometimes it's just a little emotionally unsatisfying to just kill bees. So I probably do it more often than I should, but I usually salvage bees whenever I can. If things are going really, really hectic, and we've had bees show up in like water meter boxes or irrigation valve boxes, I have been known to just go in and foam. But I don't particularly like to do that if I have time to box them up.
Africanized bees can't be domesticated once they're Africanized?
Oh yeah, you can. It is not easy. You have to go in, you have to kill the queen. Once you have your box set up, go in a week later, remove and destroy all queen cells that are present. All right? After a week, that colony cannot produce its own queen. So, so the queen is going to be desperate, or the colony is going to be desperate for a queen. Then you can go in and put in your own queen. The recommended method that we have is you use the cage that you put into the comb. All right, so it's just a hardware cloth with plastic screen box. You find a section of brood that's all capped. Put your queen in there, put the cage over top of her. When those worker bees come out, those brand new worker bees, oh, you must be mom. All right, we'll take care of you. We'll clean out the cells. She'll start laying eggs. Now she's really generating queen pheromone, and the colony is more likely to accept it. And then after 2 weeks of that, you start seeing eggs in the cell, or larvae, better yet larvae. Then you can go ahead and remove the cage. Go back and check, make sure they haven't killed her, because Africans are known for doing that. Just putting a queen in a hive, an African hive that's been dequeened. I know people who had to do it 3 or 4 times before they got the colony so desperate that they would take a European queen. So, all right, I think I'm getting the message that it's time to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kern, but I want to show Dr. Kern something because we did it at our last bee meeting, and a question came up, or a picture came up, that I thought was interesting. So, if you want to ask Dr. Kern another question while I get this up and running, you're more than welcome.
Quick about splits. Best practices for if you do a split, the distance between the original and the split hive.
No, I don't know the answer to that. What's the best recommendation?
2 feet.
At least 2 feet, I would say.
Right next to it.
Yeah, I've done all different things and it seems to work. The bees want to live, you know.
Yeah.
I've got a question.
Yep.
What's the easiest way for a lazy beekeeper to keep their bees?
Hire somebody.
Somebody else did.
Well, yeah, you can hire somebody.
In other words, you can hire someone. But I mean, if you bee geeks get into like you open it up and you take a magnifying glass and you do it. Just want them happy and produce honey.
Yeah.
Can I do that?
You need to check them.
Once a month, right?
Yeah, for parasite levels, for beetles, and with my Africanized colonies, I'll go in and I'll pop out some of the honey super frames, but I don't go into the brood box. But I can look down. If I take out the honey super frames, I can look down and I can see the brood. And I can take a flashlight and I can look at the quality of the brood. But every couple of months, you still need to go in and remove a frame of brood and look at it. Make sure you have a good brood pattern.
So it's easy.
It's relatively easy, yeah. It shouldn't take a long time unless you have 1,000 hives. Anybody here have 1,000 hives?
Anybody could do it, right?
Yeah.
It's easy.
Yep.
And it's fun.
Can you look at this?
Yep.
These are supersedure cells from what he was talking about. And most time what you do is you see, well, why do I have supersedure cells that are evacuated but also have holes?
Typically, the queen exits the bottom of the cell,
Yeah.
and then she destroys the side of all the others to kill the competition. So he's got a picture of one that has the trap door on the bottom open, so that one supposedly made it, but it also has a destroyed side cell.
She was just really being thorough.
Okay.
Oh,
And every once in a while you'll see, especially on a supersedure, I've actually seen where you had 2 queen cells and both had the caps popped open. So we had 2 queens emerge. Sometimes they will fight. Sometimes I have seen, especially when you have sisters, I've seen 2 queens in the same hive.
Wow.
And it's actually not as uncommon as you might expect. So
would it be a good practice to remove one of them and split that?
if you wanted to do a split, yeah, you could do a split. It's not uncommon for it to happen. It's not going to hurt anything, I don't think. It's sort of like a ready-made split, though. Yeah.
so recommendations for a beekeeper who doesn't want to do a split but wants to control swarming. What would be the best practice? I know because you said they have the biological drive to swarm no matter what.
All right.
But to
If you
reduce-
don't want your colony to swarm, and you don't want to make a split, what I would probably do is add a second brood box.
Give them room.
All right, give them more room. You can also go in and pull out the side frames from the brood box if they're full of honey. Pull those out, replace them with new frames. And it's a good idea to do that anyways because you want to rotate your frames. When you start,
If you find cells, if you find swarm cells, you cut them out.
yeah, I just cut them
As
out.
long as they're not supersedure cells.
You're not going to stop the swarm.
I know,
Yeah.
but
You're not
slow
gonna-
it down.
you're not
But if you give them room and you remove those queen cells,
It'll help.
it'll help.
Thanks, Dr.
Thank you.
Kern. The next thing, we're going to kind of transition into a different subject here. And so if you want to talk more about bees at the end of this conversation, everybody loves to talk about bees and knows about bees. But one thing I want to show you on this site real quick is, and it is a segue to our next conversation, is one of the things when we do bee meetings is we always talk about what are our bees eating, because if you're going to be a beekeeper, one thing you'll find out is you'll know more about the local flora than most everybody else does. And if you don't, you should learn that, because you have to know what your bees are eating, because when you're inspecting your hive, you're inspecting it for strength, and if the bees don't have anything to eat, it might be a way that you're also evaluating the strength of your hive. So we always like to say what your bees are eating. And right now, if you go around South Florida, what you're going to see is this is lantana, or it's some kind of sage. That's buttonwood. If you go and see the silver buttonwood, they all got little flower stems on them, and they're all getting berries on them. This is a palm tree. If anybody asks me what my bees are, what my honey source is, my pat answer is it's raw local honey. But I think most likely the vast majority of the food that the bees are eating on the east side of Broward is palm trees, and that's a palm. These are the weeds that a lot of people put poison on their yard for in order to get rid of, but these are, I think, things that you want. This is Spanish needle. I think they call that false buttonwood. And this is
False button weed.
false button weed.
Yeah,
Okay. He knows everything about it.
So this is Biden's pilosa, and this is spermacoe, and the native one is called glabra, and then this is the rough false buttonwood, or buttonweed.
Spanish needle, false button weed.
Yeah.
And that's Mexican clover. That's sea grape. If you go east here and walk the boardwalks, and all that seagrape, they're still blooming right now. And that is what? No. It's mangrove. Thank you. I don't know if it's white or black, but it's mangrove, wild lime, and wild coffee.
That looks like black.
It's black.
Yeah. So yeah, right now, my bees are heavily going to wild coffee, wild lime, eucalyptus is flowering right now. I think melaleuca is flowering right now too. But and then let's see what else. And then Bidens and spermacoe are going to be there.
What are vines and spermacoe?
Spanish needle and the false buckwheat.
If you ever go to one of Dr. Popali's talks, he'll always tell you, don't put anything on your yard to kill the weeds, because that's what the bees are eating. And then the other part about it is don't mow it as often as you think you should. There's one other picture here where before I introduce my next person, and we did a little thing about this. I'm talking about plants intentionally. These are plants that I took off a website that says they're bee-friendly mosquito control. I'm not sure how effective that is, but these are happen to also be plants that bees like to eat. So my segue here is